Last month, we had the pleasure of seeing Taylor Chapel, no, 2 months ago, Taylor Chapel talk to us about sharks. And I just wanted to give a quick pitch for a fundraiser that they're throwing in Bend. Some of his funding has been cut for his research, like many scientists working in higher ed in the country. And so they're doing a little gig at the Big Fish Lab fundraiser on the 20th of this month at Uniting People and Places in Bend. There'll be live music and libations, and they're raising money for shark research. So, Dr. Freilich, Jerry, is no stranger to sisters. He's been here in the audience many times. He's been on this stage a few times, and it's always really interesting. I hope some of you got a chance to look at some of his bugs, his pet bugs that he brought with him in the back. He's really into bugs. He knows a lot about bugs, and there was quite a buzz. Sorry. So Jerry's a science educator, through and through. You can just tell that when he's talking about something that he's interested in, that he's found his happy place, and so we're really lucky to have him here tonight. Jerry started actually as a curatorial assistant at the Academy of Natural Sciences when he was 11. He has a master's in environmental education from Cornell and a PhD in entomology from the University of Georgia. He spent 25 years working in national parks all around the country. And it's his mission and his life's devotion to teach and study the joy and splendor of biodiversity. In speaking about his nearly 3-decade work for the National Parks Service, Jerry once said, "I cannot think of another organization I could work for. If I get cut, I bleed gray and green." So another quote that I found out there in researching Jerry a little bit really resonated with me as well. The whole idea of science is to be of service to humanity. Yeah. So hold on to your 3D glasses and welcome Jerry to the stage to talk to you about biodiversity begins with a bee.
Well, that's going to be a hard one to follow. Thank you, David. That's very kind of you. I am so delighted to be here speaking to the Sister Science Club tonight. This is one of my favorite places to come to hear other speakers, and I have been here a couple times before. I'm going to speak to you tonight about biodiversity. And before we can talk about what it is, I should more or less explain what it is, just in simple terms. Biodiversity is the number of named species in a place. And you can have it wherever you like. You can have the biodiversity of Bend, or you can have the biodiversity of a particular group, like how many different birds are there in Oregon. I mean, you can delimit it however you want. But what biodiversity is, it's a number of named species. And this is a thing that I have been working on all my life. It started, believe it or not, as David just mentioned, it started when I was a kid. That is where I was when I was 9-10 years old, right there, living in Philadelphia. And my parents took me to the Academy of Natural Sciences in downtown Philadelphia. The Academy is our nation's oldest natural history museum. It was founded in 1793 and incorporated in 1812. And I'm a child of the Academy, as if I sprang directly from the bricks and mortar of that building, like Pallas Athena springing fully armored from the forehead of Zeus. Yeah. So my parents took me to the museum when I was 9 and 10 years old. They signed me up for a class that was called the Junior Curators. It was a half-day course, several days a week during the summertime. And the people in charge of the education department took us around the museum halls, and we talked about the museum exhibits. But the magic thing about the Junior Curators was each week we would go behind the scenes in the museum and meet the actual scientists who were in charge of the departments there. They don't do that today. And I have fought all my adult life to try to make it so that people do get to meet, especially when they're kids, the scientists who really know what's going on. One of the things that they showed me at the Academy when I was 10 was they introduced me to the field of malacology. Now, probably a lot of you don't know until you see this slide what malacology is, but malacology is the study of mollusks. And it turns out that the Academy in Philadelphia has the world's second largest collection of seashells in the world. The Smithsonian in Washington is #1, the Academy is #2, the British Museum in London is #3. I met the curator of malacology at the museum, and I not only was taken by the beauty of these shells, but for some reason unknown to me, has always been part of my life, I had some kind of an aptitude for learning these scientific names. I don't know where that came from. My parents were city folks. I mean, they didn't know anything about this. It's just a thing, these names not only pop into my head, but I still remember them all. And I've just had this all my life. And for that reason, I came to the attention of Tucker Abbott, who was the curator of malacology at the Academy. He was also, at that time, probably the most famous malacologist in the United States, possibly in the world. He wrote all of these books, in addition to probably 250 scientific papers, and he noticed my ability with these scientific names, and he hired me, not for money, but as a volunteer. And I became a curatorial assistant in the Department of Malacology when I was 11 and 12 years old. My job was to unwrap these boxes of seashells that were being sent from the South Pacific. The Academy had some expeditions going on at that time. I would unwrap them from the newspaper with all Japanese and Philippine writing on them, and then unwrap the shells and lay them out in little trays on the table so that the scientists could accession them. So that was the biggest thing in the world. I have still my copy of American Seashells, the book you see on the right there. That was Tucker's magnum opus at the time. Look at the inside cover of my copy of that book. With warmest regards from the author R. Tucker Abbott, December of '60. I was 12 years old. 12 years old. I still go back to the Academy every year. This is the way the Department of Malacology looks nowadays. On the right there, you see Paul Kalaman, who is presently the collections manager of malacology. Here he is showing some of the Academy's collection. There are 5 giant rooms of seashells filled floor to ceiling, wall to wall, with the world's second largest collection. Paul here is on the left. Gary Rosenberg, the curator of malacology, is on the right. And this is me visiting the Academy last year. So now we're going to talk about different species and how many species there are and what kind of biodiversity there is on our planet. This picture is what's called a speciescape, and it shows the number of species in each of the groups represented by the size of the organism in the picture. And you can see that the fly on the upper right there is the biggest, the 800-pound gorilla, or actually the 800-pound fly in this drawing. And that's because there are more named insect species than there are of any other group of plants or animals. The vertebrate mammals that you've probably spent your whole life studying are represented by that little deer right there. So the number of actual named species, if you want to talk about biodiversity, most biodiversity is insect diversity. But how many species are there actually? If you read most books, they'll say the number is something around 3 million. But there are a group of us, and I'm probably one of them, that think that that number is probably actually low. And Terry Irwin from the Smithsonian Institution has gotten some fame for claiming that the true number is something closer to 30 million species, nearly all of them yet unknown to science. And just the fact that our uncertainty is so vast as this gives you some idea of the gap in our knowledge. I mean, if we can't even be sure to an order of magnitude what the true number is, that shows you there's a lot more to do. So life on our Earth is a living fabric of plants and animals all interacting together in the most unexpected and complicated ways. In order to understand what species are and what biodiversity is, we have to have an organizational structure to understand it. And I'll bet you every one of you in this room has learned or been forced to learn some mnemonic like this one. And you probably know what these things stand for, don't you? Show of hands here. How many people know what? Just about everybody. Okay. So this is how organisms are organized. And this system is attributed generally to Carl Linnaeus, the Swedish scientist in the 18th century, who used Latin genus and species names to identify everything. And he broke these things up into kingdom and phylum, class, order, and family, and so on. So we're going to be talking about this for the rest of my talk this evening. So I'd like to start with a simple example that you'll all be able to appreciate. So how about your cat or your dog? Okay, obviously cats and dogs are animals, they're not plants. The phylum in this case is that they're vertebrates. Okay, that's easy enough. They're mammals, and everybody in this room knows what mammals are. Cats and dogs are both in the order Carnivora, and there are quite a few different orders. There are, I think, 25 orders of mammals. And the order Carnivora is broken up into families. In the animal world, families usually have names that end in I-D-A-E. It's pronounced D or a D. So I'm going to show you now some families of carnivores. These are families of carnivores. You need to get your brain around this picture. And I'm going to come back to this picture because it's important to what I'm going to go on to afterwards. These are 5 of the families of carnivores. There are more families than that. There's quite a few that are missing here. But these 5 you all know. So up in the top left is an animal. What is it? Well, in this case, it's a coyote. But you would not mistake it for a cat or a bear or a weasel, right? It's a dog. So all the dogs, all the different species of dogs are all in the family Canidae, the upper left, dogs. On the upper right, it's a bear, Ursidae, the family of bears. Lower left, it's a kitty cat, okay? It may be a big kitty cat, but you would not mistake the kitty cat for the dog up above. It's clearly a cat. It's family, Felidae. The raccoons, maybe you're not so familiar with, but that's the family Procyon. And then in the lower right, that's a weasel, that's a pine marten. Okay, those are the steadily. Those are families of carnivores. Everybody got that?
Yeah.
Okay, now, here's where it gets tough. Okay, these are not 5 species of flies. They're not 5 species of flies. These are 5 families of flies. These are as different from each other as these are. Okay, get it? Okay? You have the Anthomyidae, the Muscidae, the Tachinidae, the Sarcophagidae, and the Calliphoridae. Those are 5 families of flies. 5 families of flies. When people talk to me, they sometimes say, well, what about the common housefly? All of these could be called, in our English language, common houseflies. How many species do you suppose that represents? My guess is it's probably about 6,000 species. Your common houseflies, what entomologists would call the calypterate muscoid flies, in these 5 families could account for 6,000 species, any of which could be buzzing in your window at the house. So they're houseflies. Okay. Same thing with bees. Let's go through the same thing with bees. Bees are animals. They are arthropods, that's their phylum. That's all the things with jointed legs. So like spiders are arthropods, and crustaceans are arthropods, and insects are arthropods. So those are the jointed leg things with 6 legs are the class Insecta. The order of bees is Hymenoptera, which includes bees, wasps, and ants. And we're going to talk much more about those as we go on. And then underneath the order, there are families. There are 6 families of bees in America. So now when I show you this next slide, you probably know what I'm going to say about it, don't you? You do. You know. These are not 4 species of bees. These are 4 families of bees. They are as different from each other as these are. Like that. Get it? 6 families of bees. And this is just 4 of them right here. So now, let's talk about bees and wasps and how all the Hymenoptera fit together. The microscope that I have in the back of the room here and a couple drawers of insects I brought with me tonight, I've been doing this same thing I'm doing in the back here. I've been doing it several days a week lately, for the last couple of years, at the High Desert Museum, south of Bend. And from doing that little exercise, I've seen how people that come into the museum look at things. And one of the things I ask them, I show them a box. It's a box sitting in the back right now. I say, look at this box. It has bees and wasps all mixed in together. Can you tell the difference between the bees and the wasps? And usually they'll look in there really, really carefully. They're looking all around. And then I tell them, you cannot tell the difference between bees and wasps by looking at them. You can't. And we'll tell you why in just a moment. But here's another question. Are these bees right here? In fact, what are we looking at right here? Are any of these bees? I'll give you a hint. One of them is a bee. Okay, the one at the top left is only bee on this picture. Okay, that bee is Sphecodes, which is one of the cuckoo bees that robs food from other bees. The one on the right, top right is a wasp. The one on the bottom right is a fly. And the one on the bottom left is a moth. So you can grade yourselves on that exam and see how well you did. So, okay, I always ask the people, well, what is the difference? You can't tell by looking at them. What is the difference between bees and wasps? The difference is that bees are vegetarian. They eat pollen and nectar. That's all they eat. The wasps, almost all of them, eat other bugs. There are exceptions, but most of them all eat other bugs. Now, bees also have plumed hairs, and we're going to see a picture of that in just a minute. Many bees, not all, have specialized structures on their bodies to carry pollen. But they're a relatively small group, 6 families in the US, 4,000 species of bees in America. And by contrast, the wasps are a much, much, much bigger empire. The wasps, 60 families with 20 or 30,000 species. If you want to think of it that way, bees are basically 6 families of vegetarian wasps. 6 families of vegetarian wasps. So that's the difference between bees and wasps. Here's a close-up picture of the plumed hairs on bees. The hairs, the tiny hairs, had hairs on them, and that seems to carry across the 6 families of bees. But they're not trivial to tell apart. Very often for the small ones, I have to look in the microscope, because there are many tiny bees that look like wasps and vice versa. I'll give you a little bit of a hint here, a little tip. I don't know if this helps you in any way. But you see that narrow stem between the abdomen and the thorax on these 3? Okay, these are 3 different families of wasps. But if you see that little narrow stem, which we call a petiole, that's the same word that botanists use to describe the stem of a leaf. If you see a wasp has got a petiole, you know that it's a wasp, because no bees have that. But here's the little problem. Most wasps don't have it either. So if you see that stem, you say, okay, it's a wasp. But if you don't see that, you still don't know what you're looking at. Now, before I leave the subject of wasps completely and we get into the bees, let me talk about wasps just for a minute. Almost everybody that comes to the museum says, I hate wasps. And I always tell them, that's like kind of saying like you hate food just because you don't like asparagus. Okay? Most food is not asparagus. Okay? And it's the same with wasps. The wasps that bother us, the yellow jackets and the hornets and the paper wasp to some degree, all 3 of those are all in the single family Vespidae. That's one family. There are 59 other families of wasps that have nothing to do with us. They're just eating other bugs and controlling their numbers and part of that living fabric of life. But it's just incredible, the complexity of it, and nothing to do with us. They're not interested in your hamburger meat at the picnic table, and they don't come around and bother us. So let's just for a little minute here talk about wasps. You probably know what I'm going to say about this picture, don't you? Right? These are not just 4 species of wasps. These are 4 families of wasps. All of them have complex, very, very interesting life histories. I'll give you just one example here. This is a bee wolf, the family Philanthidae. I have one of them in back of the room here, and if we have time after my talk, I can show it to you. The bee wolves, it's not a species, it's a family. The Philanthids all go after bees. She'll fly around till she finds a bee. She'll sting the bee to paralyze it. Then she'll fly with the paralyzed bee to her little hole in the ground and go down in there and lay her egg on it. Then she covers the hole over with dirt and she flies away. The baby wasp will eat the paralyzed bee. It will go into its cocoon down in the ground, and then next year a new little wasp will come out. Nearly all of the wasps, all of the 20,000 species have a life story something like that. And in the picture of the book here, you see the cover of the book? You see what she's got over here? That's the paralyzed bee that she's carried to her nest. This book was written by Howard Evans, who signed my book. I have it in the back of the room there. Evans was my major professor at Harvard. And I met my professor, Bob Matthews, at Cornell. And then Matthews, Evans, and I have all worked together on phyllanthid wasps. So how does anybody make any sense of this? Unlike birds, like take birds as an example. If you are interested in birds, or you look out in your backyard, you see a bird, you can get a bird book and look in it, and you can identify birds by looking at a picture in a book. You can't do that with insects. You just can't eyeball them. There are just too many of them. How many kinds of birds are there in all of America? Any idea? Any answer within the order of magnitude is correct. Anybody have an idea?
1,000.
Okay, the actual number is like 700. Okay, 750, 800. That's including the accidentals, the things that get blown in on storms that are not usually here. Okay, 700 to 800, that's the idea. Any one group of insects is going to have 3 times that number of things. You can't look at them in a book. You just can't. You can't. So you have to spend time with the microscope. People think that, if you've had entomology, you can identify insects. It just doesn't work that way. Undergraduates can key easy families, and they can cite ID orders, but that's it. Graduate students can key any family, and they know a few genera. This is a pretty true thing. Even though I have a PhD in entomology and years of experience, I consider myself in this group right here, okay? The museum guru, like Dave Kavanaugh here, these guys are like gods. We have some gods at OSU. I know a few of them. Actually, I know quite a few of them, these gods of the museums. And they're really, really amazing what they can do. But the field is so vast that only a specialist in one group can identify species. In bird world, you talk about species. In insects, you don't talk about species unless you're an expert in that group. You just don't do it. It can't be done. So how do we identify stuff? Well, we use what's called a dichotomous key. And there is a key to the bees of the Pacific Northwest. This is done by the guys at OSU, Link Best, and the others that you see listed there, August Jackson. I know some of these guys. And it uses very, very tiny characters that you can only see in a microscope. For example, this is the first step in the key to the bees of Oregon. The first thing is, does it have 3 submarginal cells in the front wing, or only 2? So first, you have to know what submarginal cells are. And then you have to have a microscope, and you have to tell. And then you go on and on and on from there. And I have a copy of this key on the back table there. I can show it to you after the program. So basically, it's a series of paired couplets, they're called, where each couplet asks you to make a decision. Is it that way or that way? And you keep making these decisions until 3 hours later, you realize you made a mistake back on step 4. And you're back to the beginning again, which is how I have spent most of my adult life. Did you know that every one of the veins on wings, insect wings, every one of the veins has a name? And every one of the cells in between the veins also have names. The distal cell, the costal vein, the subcostal, the radial veins, the medial veins, the cubital veins, they all have names and numbers. The legs, or as my wife would say, the legas of the insects also have very detailed parts. The mouth parts can be very, very difficult also. The picture on the right shows the dissected mouth parts of a honeybee, just a regular bee. When you have tiny little probes and you dissect it, you see all these tiny parts. And the couplets in the key will sometimes ask, does the labial palp have 3 segments or only 2? And you have to see that. And it doesn't matter how tiny the bee is. It's still the same couplet. It drives you nuts. There are long-tongued bees and short-tongued bees. It goes by family and by genus. It leads to many, many confusions. I'll give you a minute to ponder this. Insect mouth parts are very, very complicated. So now, I feel like we really need to talk about bees because I did promise to talk about bees here. So let's talk about the evolution of bees. You may not realize it, but bees are relatively new in the insect world. Like, you've seen dragonflies. And dragonflies have looked almost exactly the same as they do now for 400 million years. There were dragonflies flying around that looked just like the ones we have today 200 million years before dinosaurs appeared. So the dragonflies are very, very ancient. And other things, mayflies, stoneflies, a whole bunch of those are very ancient. But bees are new. And the bees arose in the middle or the end of the dinosaur period, when the flowering plants started to evolve. You know that during most of the dinosaur time, there was no flowering plants. Flowering plants really arose towards the end of the dinosaur period, in the Cretaceous, which is the most recent of the 3 dinosaur periods. So the dinosaurs were in the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous. The flowering plants arose in the Cretaceous, and the bees started radiating around that same time, and they were pollinating those plants, and are partly responsible for the success of the flowering plants. Bees evolved from a group of wasps that today are called the specids, or the Specodia. The specid wasps are the closest relatives of today's bee families. So then let's talk about the bees that we have around us now. When people go to school these days, in fact most of you, I imagine, you know about one kind of bee, and that bee is the honeybee. Do you know where honeybees come from? They come from Europe. They come from Europe. They're European, which leads me to this very important question. When you go into the bathroom, you're American. And when you come out of the bathroom, you're American.
Yeah.
What are you while you're in the bathroom?
European.
Okay. People think that because they know about European honeybees, they probably think, well, we know about bees in general. But the problem is that European honeybees are different from any of our American bees. There are no American bees that are like honeybees. None of them. So here's the difference between our bees, and we have 4,000 species of bees in America, probably 500 species in Oregon. But none of our native bees live in hives. None of them. None of our bees have workers, queens, and drones. None of our bees store up honey that we can use. And none of our bees have that thing about stinging only one time. So it's really quite amazing, really. You know, if you really want to know about honeybees, well, there are a lot of people who study them. I don't study them. And the reason is because everyone else does. We have in Oregon an Oregon State Bee Atlas program. I am part of that program, and I will put the contact information for it in one of the last slides of this talk. But at any rate, nearly all of our American bees are solitary. They do not have large colonies. They do not live in hives. None of them store up honey except, well, bumblebees store up honey, but it's in a microscopic amount. It's tiny. It's not usable by us. So how did honeybees get here? Well, European settlers brought them here. Why did they do that? Well, they wanted to have honey. Yeah, there was no honey available before Europeans brought honeybees to our country. So our bees all nest in different ways. Why do European honeybees store up honey? Why? The reason is because they overwinter as adults in a hive. Bees are alive as adults in the hive, and they need something to eat over the winter. Our native bees do not have hives, and there are very few of them that overwinter as adults. Nearly all of our bees overwinter either as an egg or as a little chrysalis, a little pupa hiding in the soil. And none of them are in large colonies, none of them. So European honeybees store up that stuff because they need it to eat over the wintertime. So our bees are divided up into their different nesting habitats. There are many of our bees, I said 80%, something like that, just nest in little ordinary looking holes in the ground. The vast number of them do. And there'll be only like 8 or 10 bees in one of those holes. That's it, the total colony. Here is one example of that. This is Halictus. I've been studying these bees quite a bit before I moved here to Bend. They live in a little hole in the ground that looks like this. The mother bee will make these little shafts, and then she enlarges a little hole, a little cavity at the bottom of each of those shafts, and she'll put a little ball of pollen in there and lay an egg on it. So in each of those little cluster there'll be a little ball of pollen and maybe 1 or 2 bees. And that's it. Now one bee may make 8 or 10 of these little holes, but that's all that they do. The bumblebees are the only ones of our native bees that actually make what you would call a colony. But bumblebee colonies almost always in the ground, they're underground, and a bumblebee colony will have at the most 40 or 50 bees in it. I don't know, maybe 60 bees. They're small colonies. And they do store up honey in these little honey pots that you see in the picture. But it's tiny amounts that the little bee larvae can use. It's not enough for humans to use. The remainder group of bees, mostly the ones that we have, are carpenters that live in hollow twigs or in holes in trees. There are different varieties of this, different families that do this. You may have seen these little bundles of tubes in the garden store that they sell for these cavity nesting bees. The mason bees and the leaf cutter bees live in those little holes. The mother bee will bring a little ball of pollen in there, lay an egg on it, and then she guards them, and that's the way they reproduce. I saw this bee nest exhibit in front of the Natural History Museum in Paris, where I was. That sign in French, Hôtel de Charme, a charming hotel for native bees, with all different wood blocks with different size holes in it. The leafcutter bees are also cavity nesters, and you can see in this picture and in this one, if you've ever seen leaves in your garden that have these distinct holes cut near the edge of the leaf, that's who does it. The leafcutter bee will chew that disc of leaf with her jaws, then she flies with the disc of leaf to the little hollow stem where she's got her ball of pollen in there. She lays an egg on the ball of pollen, and then she stuffs that leaf in there and chews it to make a little nest. And then she'll repeat that over and over, so that in a little hollow twig, no longer than 6 inches long, there may be 8 little balls of pollen, each with an egg on it, and each separated from the next with a little wall made from your rose bush. Another group of bees are the cuckoo bees. Now, these bees do not gather pollen and nectar, but rather they steal the resources from closely related bee taxa. And this is one of the fascinating aspects of bee evolution. I don't have time to discuss it tonight, but this is a fascinating subject where many of the families of bees have cuckoo bees closely related to them which prey on their pollen and nectar resources. When I was the chief of research at Olympic National Park, that was between 2002 and 2015 when I retired. I was the chief of research at the park for 13 years. We were doing part of this pollinator survey where we would put these little pots, these little cups of water out in alpine meadows. There were blue, green, and white cups with just a little water in them. We laid them out in the morning, and this was part of a national survey of alpine nesting bees that was done in all of the national parks nationwide. So I was just part of this larger project. So we collected the bees, and all the bees were sent to Patuxent, Maryland, and they were cleaned up, they were blown dry, they were washed and blown dry and then tinned up. And this guy, Sam Droege, identified all the bees from all the national parks. And how he did this, I really have no idea. We imagined, we sent the bees away in world packs. We just sent them away. I pictured that this is what his workshop looked like. I mean, how in the world he ever did that, I really don't know. I think the project is over now, but Sam is still going at it until they've taken his budget away. So, folks, this is my introduction to bees, and I want to just leave you with a few close-up pictures. So, most of you have those 3D glasses. And if you have them, you can put them on now. I'm told that not everyone, there was not enough glasses so everyone could have them. So I hope that you'll share them with people sitting next to you if you do not have one of those. The pictures you're about to see were taken by my colleague and friend, Dr. Jessica Ricken. Jessica got her PhD at OSU and then went on to work at Harvard she worked at Harvard in E.O. Wilson's lab, and she took these pictures using the mosaic equipment at Harvard. You all ready for this? Okay, so that was a bumblebee. That was a bumblebee. Here's another bumblebee. In this case, you're seeing the long tongue. Bumblebees have long tongues. Wow, pretty amazing, huh? Yeah. Okay, this is one of the sweat bees, one of the halictids. This is Agapostemon. It's bright green colored with a yellow and black banded abdomen. It has long antennae on the males. By the way, female bees have 12 antennal segments. Male bees have 13. Why is that? I have no idea. See the simple eye? You see the compound eyes, the big eyes on the sides there, but you see one of the 3 simple eyes in the middle there, in between the 2 antennae. Yeah, pretty cool. Most of them eat pollen, and yeah, they eat pollen. And the males are short-lived, usually. Okay, this next one is a honeybee. And one of the things that's pretty amazing is that honeybees, people don't realize this, honeybees have hairs that grow out of their eyeballs. Can you see the hairs coming out of the eyeball? Yeah, it's one of the characteristics of honeybees. It's amazing. They also, I think, lack the spine on the hind leg, which other bees have. There are all these differences. I mean, this is very complicated stuff. This is Autochloropsis. This is one of the metallic green bees, and on this one you'll see pollen on the scopa. That's the parts that collect the pollen. Yeah, pretty amazing. This is another one of the longhorn bees, Melisodes. what I have to show you to take care of. Interested in going deeper into bees, Oregon State has this wonderful program called the Bee Atlas Program. There is a website, there are weekly meetings, there are volunteer groups throughout the state of Oregon. We are the Central Oregon group here, but we have meetings that are online each week. It's about, you catch the buzz, usually on one weekday night each week. And if you write down that email address, or the web, sorry, not an email, it's a web address down at the bottom there, extension.oregonstate.edu/bee-atlas. They will take care of you. Those of you who may know about Oregon State Extension, Heike Williams, who is with Oregon State in Central Oregon, I believe she's based in Redmond. But I think she lives in Madras, actually. But if you contact Oregon State Extension, they will put you in touch with this program. And they're really, really great. And you'll learn a great deal. And what we do is basically go out and collect bees. And then they all get sent to Corvallis. And there's teaching involved. So you learn how to tell the bees apart. You learn microscope work and so on. And so, that's about it. This is my contact information. I can stay here, it's what, 7:45 right now. I can take questions if you like. And I can stay here after the talk in the back there with the microscope as long as they'll let me stay. I know we have to vacate the room. And also, of course, we'd love to have the glasses back. And there, as at the back door.
As you leave, there's a bucket here to put them in.
Yeah, there'll be a basket there for you to put the glasses in. So anybody with questions, you're welcome to, yeah.
I'm a neighbor who has bees that sleep all night long in the flowers.
Yes. The question is about bees that sleep all night long in flowers. Very often, those are larger bodied bees, and what they are is they are foraging until the temperature gets so low that their body metabolism can't take off. So they just do an emergency bivouac, and they're sleeping there until the sun in the morning warms up and they can fly away. And there's been a great deal of study of that. One of the leading people studying that has been Bernd Heinrich, whose book, Bumblebee Economics, won, I believe, a Pulitzer Prize. Heinrich is now retired. He was at the University of Vermont for many years. And he's retired now to the state of Maine, but he's a wonderful writer, and Bumblebee Economics will go into the whole economics of what it takes to fly when it's cold. Yeah. In the back.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. If you want to have bees for environmental reasons, not for honey production reasons, what should you get? What should you do?
Okay, good question. If you want to encourage bees and pollinators, not necessarily honeybees for the honey, what should you do? I always tell people that you want to plant a diversity of native plants. And there are many ways to go about this, like the garden centers around here. A lot of the folks there are quite expert at that, and they will sell you like seed packages and stuff like that. The Bee Atlas people also have seed packages available to do that. But the weird part about it, maybe a little bit of a conundrum there, is that a lot of times we find that non-native plants, things that you wouldn't think would be attractive, do attract a lot of different bees. So, you know, my wife, for example, we have a garden in my backyard, and we're always constantly trying to plant natives, but it's very confusing to realize that sometimes these non-natives get all the bees on them. So, I don't know what the final word on that is, but here, as a general word to everybody, I would suggest one thing that I've told you in this talk is that you cannot eyeball these bees and know what kind they are. You have to have a microscope, and they've got to be on pins, or you just can't do it. So what I tell people is learn really well what European honeybees look like. And then after that, you can start to discern the differences among the other ones that you start to see. Like very long antennae on some, for example. The family of the leafcutter bees and the mason bees collect pollen on the underside of their abdomen rather than on their legs. So if you see bees with pollen down here, you know that that's this other family. So those are keys to help you learn it. I wish I had a better answer. Yeah, go ahead.
So in other words, just to recap what you're saying, the best thing that you can do for the environment is to plant pollinator-friendly plants rather than to build habitats.
I think that's a safe thing to say. And I think that it's pretty amazing how productive small patches of flowers can be. And I mean, remember that almost all of these little bees are just nesting in little holes in the ground. You see the bee in this picture right here? This is Algochlorella. It's one of the halictids. They nest in just a little hole in the ground. Looks like somebody stuck a pencil in the ground. They're very unassuming little holes in the ground. And if you study those, you know, if you see little holes in the ground, you know what I do? I take a little glass baby food jar and put it over the hole, and you see who comes out? That's pretty cool. You can do a lot of good work just by doing that. Yeah, somebody else.
Does the disease that has been affecting the honeybees also been affecting the other families?
Okay, good question. Have the diseases and other problems that we've been reading about in the paper that affect honeybees, have they been affecting these other things? It's an excellent question. And I think the answer to that is that honeybees, because they live in a big group, are more subject to these kinds of problems than our native bees that are spread out all over creation in small numbers in these little isolated holes all over the place. So it's just like with humans. Like during COVID, where would you find the big numbers of infected people? You know, wherever people gathered. And the whole idea that they're spread out means that the numbers of affected individuals are less. However, I would condition that answer by saying that nobody knows how these native bees are doing because you can't count them the way you would if you're a beekeeper and you've got hives of bees. The beekeeper knows exactly how his bees are doing. But for these native bees that are living in little holes all over creation, it's really hard to know how they're doing. And that's one of the reasons why we have the Oregon State Bee Atlas Project. Because we're trying to find where the bees are, how many species are there, and where are they? Yeah. Okay, in the back.
Yeah, I read that I think California where they grow almonds,
Yeah.
that they're closely dependent on bees and there was a bee issue. Can you kind of put that into a summary for me of what went on there?
No, wait, now, were there bee, what was the word?
Well, I thought there was an issue with the almond production in California.
Well, almond production is heavily reliant on honeybees,
Yeah,
which are moved by these commercial beekeepers. They put the hives on the back of a truck and move the hives around to where they're needed.
Yeah, was there a disease with the honeybees that interfered with the almond production or something?
Well, I think it's just the numbers of bees declining is the problem. I don't think the bees are bringing a problem with them.
Oh,
I mean, that's my impression of it.
yeah. Do you know why they're going down in numbers?
There's a wide variety of factors that goes into that.
There are varroa mites, there's all kinds of different things that attack the bees, you know, in these large colonies, in these large hives. Yeah, they're prone to that. Yes?
Is there any way to track these with like a microchip?
I think the answer to that is no. Now, having said that, Bert Heinrich, who I mentioned a few moments ago for his book Bumblebee Economics, he did put little transponders on honeybees, and he was able to monitor their coming and going from hives. He did that at UC Berkeley in the 1970s and early 80s. And so you might say that that was an effort to do that. My own PhD work was on salmon flies, which are aquatic insects. They're large stone flies. And what I did with my stone flies was I attached little paper tags to 3,000 of them and followed them around in the stream at Grand Teton National Park. But I don't think there's a way to electronically monitor them with today's technology. I mean, I'm following that pretty closely. And so far as I know, it's not. I know they're doing it with monarch butterflies. Yeah, I read that recently, but not so far as I know with bees. Stay tuned on that one. Anybody else? Yeah.
I grew up in the valley and we used to have mason bees.
Yes.
Used those quite a bit for blueberries and things like that. Do mason bees do well here?
Yes, mason bees do very well. I have one on a pin. That one's not doing very well. You know, people, oftentimes actually children ask me, why do you pin all these, why do you kill them? And I understand very well the idea people don't want to kill things, especially if you really like them. But here's the answer that I give, and you can take it for what it's worth. If you want to study insects, you have to kill them and put them on a pin, because it's the only way you can look at them under a microscope. Like if they're flying around, okay, possible exception. You can chill them down in the freezer or in the fridge for a couple minutes, look at them under the microscope and then let them go. You can do that. But most entomology is done through the microscope, and you've got to have them on a pin to do that. And I can show you the pinned insects in the boxes back there, and it's just the way it works. So, yeah. Okay, anybody else who hasn't had a chance? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm under the impression that some bees are predatory with other bees. Is this common or not common?
They are not predatory. They are...
Or aggressive, maybe?
No, wait, the word that I'm wanting is where they steal stuff. They're, there's a word for somebody that steals. Wait. No, thieves.
Kleptoparasitism.
No,
Kleptoparasitism.
not scavenger. What's the word on you? I'm having a senior moment here. There's an elegant English word that we use for a thing where you steal.
Cuckoo!
It's not opportunist. There's another.
You use the word cuckoo.
Yeah, well, cuckoo bees steal resources from other bees. And for each of the families of bees, there is a group of closely related congeners that steal from their close relatives. Kleptoparasitism. A kleptocracy. And we won't use that word to describe any of our present government. But there are kleptoparasitic bees, and they don't have pollen collecting structures on their bodies. So this habit has evolved over a very, very long time to have been refined into the way that they are now. And it's very interesting that most of them steal from close relatives. And the thought there is that because through evolution, they had the chemical pathways enabled that allow them to be close to their relatives. And then they took it one step farther by stealing from their relatives. Yeah. So it's kleptocracy with a K. Yeah. Okay, I think I better call it a day.
Thank you, Jerry, very much. I understand that you're going to be in the corner there for a few minutes with the microscope and talking to folks, which is...
Do we have a hard...
Yeah, we're good. So just...
I'll be back there.
Also, of course, course, as is usual, if you have the opportunity and you can do it, help us with the chairs. As
You guys can leave the chairs.
Oh, we're leaving the chairs tonight? Hey, time to go visit Jerry.